Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Headlines, the Business of Columbia. This is the first of a monthly series of webinars, web chats, whatever you want to call them, that we're going to have here at Post and Courier Columbia with our staff. As I said, we're starting off with our business writers today, Jessica Holdman and Mike Fitz. So before we begin, I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves to you a little bit, tell you a little bit about themselves, how long they've been in Columbia. Let's go ahead and start with Jessica. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Can everyone hear me? Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Holdman. I am a business reporter with the Post and Courier. I have been working here in Columbia for almost 2 years now, and I have been writing about business for about a decade. Before coming to South Carolina, I spent 8 years in North Dakota, moving there at an interesting time right as an oil boom hit the state, and spent a lot of time covering energy, agriculture, healthcare, you name it, in the capital city up there. As far as my focus here, I am writing a lot about economic development, a lot of the larger development projects that the Midlands area, as well as housing and growth, and the occasional articles about technology, healthcare, and sometimes tourism.
Great. And Mike, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Fitz, and I've been a writer and editor in Columbia for, I hesitate to say, about 30 years now for a variety of organizations. And a lot of that time has been spent on, focused on business, on long-term economic plans and new projects and developments as they came up. So in that time, I've seen a bunch of change in this community. I was just thinking about this the other day when I wrote about Walmart taking the rare step of closing a store, which Walmart doesn't generally do, on the Bush River Road area. And that reminds me that in my early days in Columbia, the Bush River Road area, the Dutch Square Mall, was a pretty strong retail area. It was full, it was heavily trafficked. And over my decades here, I've seen that growth move out and areas like Columbia Mall and the Bush River Road area change. So I've been here long enough to see a lot of change go through how the economy works in Columbia, and to see some of the kind of long expected and promised growth here finally start to kick in recent years. Recently, I've been focusing on, for the Post and Courier, on especially retail openings and closings, how companies are doing, what trends are in retail, but also other developments too, such as business locations and offices. So a lot of my energy goes into this basic stuff as this is now open or this is no longer open.
Well, today we're going to talk a lot about sort of the trends that Mike and Jessica are seeing and what they've been reporting on. Some of the things maybe to expect this year, whether it's projects or whether it's, sort of what we might see next happening around here based on, obviously some of the stuff that they've collected from economists, from developers, from real estate brokers, as well as just obviously merchants and folks that they talk to each day. So, and the other thing too is we'll hopefully leave some time at the end for some questions. So please feel free to leave some of those in the chat if you want, and we'll get to those as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start with Mike. And Mike, you write a weekly business column for us on Tuesdays that goes up around 11 o'clock on Tuesdays. That looks at everything from what's opening, what's closing, to the latest in housing developments and things like that. What kind of trends are you seeing? What are you noticing as you're assembling that column each week and telling folks about what's happening around the Columbia region?
Well, one of the big trends we're seeing is that more space that is defined officially as retail is actually going not to a store, but to a service or some destination that folks want to go take part in. That's a trend that's been around nationally for a while, and you're certainly seeing it here. You're seeing more retail space that is actually a gym or an exercise area. Those are very common, taking up what would officially be defined as retail space. You're seeing more basic services that you might not have thought would be in a strip shopping center, a dental office, and things like that. So you're seeing a conversion because there is a lot of retail out there, and we're seeing the shift to online retail continue. You're seeing a trend of other uses coming for that space. Before the pandemic hit, we were seeing a bunch of kind of recreational uses for what used to be a big box space. What used to be a big department store or a grocery store becomes a trampoline park, a destination people take their kids. So one of the interesting things we'll be looking at is to see whether that continues to happen. Do those things all just bounce back after the pandemic? Some of them are open again. Some, a couple of, at least one of them decided to get out of business. So we'll see more creative space uses, I think, and the folks in commercial real estate and retail real estate tell me that we're going to see more things that aren't quote unquote a store in a retail space. Another trend we're seeing is we've seen some closures, maybe not as as bad as the economy's been, maybe not as many as we feared. And a lot of those closures have been national chains pulling back and chains that have 100 locations saying, do we need 100 locations in the Southeast? But if you're a small business owner and this is your only location, you're mostly trying to hang on until things get better.
Real quick, we've seen the recent news about Belk. I mean, have you heard if there's any concern that we might be losing stores as a result of the
Belk has already cut itself down a bit, but it wouldn't stun me. They're now down to 3 locations in the Midlands that closed at Dutch Square a few years ago, for instance. And really, the 3rd location they have is right close to downtown in Richland Mall. That would be one that I think you would have a question mark over. I haven't heard anything to imply that. And Belk's statement about reorganizing didn't say they were going to function as normal. It didn't hint at cuts, but they have 1 location out Harbison. They have 1 location at Village at Sand Hill. So they have those 2 areas covered. And then they have 1 downtown location in a mall that is not doing a lot right now. So that would be, I think, something to watch.
And Jessica, you cover a lot of economic development for the paper. Again, what are you seeing as sort of some trends that are going to come up? What are some of the projects that we're going to maybe see coming up in the next year or so?
Sure. Going a little bit off of what Mike said about the questions that are hanging over the head in that sphere. The industrial side of things have actually been quite the opposite. It's become almost a haven for developers and for investors as the manufacturing sector has bounced back faster than other parts of the economy. And so we're in the midst of a pandemic, and Richland County announced their largest economic development deal this year in the form of a White Claw brewery and cannery that'll be coming into Lower Richland. There are new developers coming into the market building manufacturing and industrial space speculatively. They don't have a tenant in mind, but they're confident that someone's going to come in and lease it. And a lot of the real estate agents working in that sphere have been making deals on faster timelines than they ever have previously. So from talking to industry experts, they say don't expect that to stop anytime soon. They're expecting this to continue through 2021.
What are you seeing in terms of housing, real estate development, new home development?
Sure, that's another area that has been virtually recession-proof. It's happening across the nation, and South Carolina is no exception. In fact, in the Midlands in September, they the largest number of new home permits pulled than they had in the last 14 years. So it's not slowing down. The builders are staying busy, and those areas of town that have been popular are going to be the areas that we continue to see growth. There's also been builders that have found success in maybe some areas that hadn't been tried before. Lake Murray is obviously a very popular place to live, but you've got developers even trying out northern parts of the lake and selling out just as quickly in more rural areas that perhaps people hadn't looked at before.
Well, good. By the way, in the chat area, Jessica's posted her email address and her handle on Twitter. Mike will follow suit, I'm sure, a little bit as we go ahead. But please feel free, obviously, to reach out to Mike and to Jessica, and also follow them on their social media for news, as well as to give them news tips, because that's a big thing that obviously we're looking for. Is we want you all to tell us what's happening out there, what we need to be paying attention to, and so we need you to help on all of that. Well, the news just came out that for the first time in the United States, the South African variant of COVID-19 has hit, and it's hit actually in South Carolina, which is a reminder, of course, that we're still in the middle of the pandemic, almost heading to a 1-year anniversary. What kind of impacts have you seen on Columbia businesses from COVID, and how do you think that might affect things in the future? In some of the decisions that these folks are making. I'll go ahead and start with Jessica.
Sure, Andy. I guess this year, South Carolina economists came out and said that the pandemic has had a vastly different impact depending on the industry, and also depending on people's the jobs that they work. For the most part, those that are on the unemployment rolls are working in the hospitality sectors. Those industries obviously have not come back the way that others have. But again, the manufacturing sector has largely rebounded, and that's where these people are that are still out there buying homes. You're seeing folks that work in the white collar sphere that didn't lose their jobs, maybe had to switch to a remote working scenario, but they're able to still go out there and buy homes, and that's been driving that sector of the economy as well. But Mike could probably talk a little bit more, covering the retail sector, about what he's seen on that side.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of retailers just kind of, they say business is not good, but I'm just going to hold on. The restaurant segment that's really taken the worst pounding has been your high-end sit-down, order a bottle of wine restaurants, and that's because they had space restrictions cut into them the most. They are less equipped, or maybe even their business isn't really designed to do carry out. And and even when they do get carry out business, it's not the same if people aren't taking a bottle of wine with them or something like that. And their demographics for those restaurants tends to be people who are Gen Xers like me, or boomers, and those folks had to be more careful. So we've seen a lot of that. And we've also seen a lot of businesses, even small businesses, having to reinvent their online half on the fly, where maybe online was a small part of their business, and then last spring it suddenly became a hugely important part of their business. So they've been working to get that worked out, and that's going to be something they take with them from the pandemic, maybe, is to be more equipped to be as successful online as they are from customers walking into the store.
How do you think the idea that this may extend a few more months, this may extend into the summer, the fall, play a factor in decisions? Or do you think folks have their fingers crossed that we'll get those vaccines sooner than later, and things will be back to normal before fall kickoff?
I think a lot of people are in we've made it this far, we're going to hold out position, especially on the restaurant side. If you can get warm weather, in early spring in South Carolina, you can have more people who will be interested in outdoor dining. That's really tough if you're in the Northeast, but in South Carolina on a good evening, you can do that in February. So I think that there's a lot of, we're going to try to hold out. And, the vaccine has, even though people haven't mostly received the vaccine, they know that it's out there, and it's a sign that however long this tunnel is, there is light at the end of it. So I think that you will see people kind of hanging on to get through the spring and into the summer in the hopes of actually a more normal fall season.
Anything you want to add to that, Jessica?
I guess another sector to think about in the hospitality sphere are hotels. You mentioned this fall, football season is usually huge for the hotels in town. You can't find a room. And unfortunately this year with smaller crowds, hotels took a hit on that business, as well as reduced business travel. South Carolina has been fortunate, and Columbia included, in that their occupancy rates have been a little bit higher than the national average, but it's definitely nowhere near what they were experiencing before. Downtown in particular, those hotels were going gangbusters before this hit. Their rates were rising. There were more hotels rising as a result. There were talks of expanding the convention center and hotels related to that. And there's a number of hotel owners that have had to take a step back. There's been government programs helping them through in the meantime, but it's just been more of a lifeline, and they can't rely on that forever to keep going.
And the other big hotel driver in Columbia that we lost last year was the Masters golf tournament. It will be back in April with some fans. Nobody knows how many, but that might be the biggest single week in Columbia hotels every year. So they might get some of that, but maybe not much of it back this spring.
I'm gonna let me jump off of that. When I was asked to host this, I call this the business of Columbia. If you're describing to people who may not know Columbia, South Carolina, or may just be vaguely familiar with it, what would you say is the business of South Carolina? Jessica, why don't you start?
Actually, I'll kind of kick that one to Mike to start off.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a vague category, but it's really accurate to say that a lot of the Midlands economy is based on services. Which is kind of a vague demographic category, but you have big industries like insurance support and insurance IT. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina is a huge employer here, and lots of companies that work with them in that sector of insurance IT. And you have lots of other companies. You have people who work for the state government or federal government, and you have people who provide third-party services to them. So services is kind of a broad economic category, but that's really a lot of what the private enterprise or the business that goes on in Columbia. We are not a big manufacturer, and there are a variety of reasons for that. We can talk about, we have more travel coming in than we used to, but that's not a huge sector. We do some warehousing, but really Columbia's capital economy has a lot of what you would just categorize as services.
And building off of that, Mike sort of alluded to this, but one of the challenges that a lot of industry faces are property taxes in the area make it difficult for industry that requires large space to locate. And it's led to this initiative that Richland County and the city are taking on in an effort to attract more of these service and technology-based businesses that maybe don't require the same amount of footprint. And it's becoming sort of this new initiative that they're looking at economic development in a different way than maybe they had previously.
I guess, so what is some of the I hate to say it, and people want to know what's the cool stuff that's going to be coming this year. What are we going to be seeing next? I know, again, it's obviously all colored a little bit with what's going on with the pandemic, but as you both have said, in all the sectors you're covering, we're seeing still some growth. We're still seeing some change. So, in in the next few months, in the next year or so, what are we going to see coming online? That's just obviously that's going to be interesting for folks to maybe see or to shop or to maybe get a job at.
Well, one of the things we've always been keeping an eye on the last couple of years that has gotten a ton of attention is the Bull Street redevelopment of the former Department of Mental Health campus right there close to downtown. You have a couple of retailers in the retail area of that who are now open. Starbucks opened recently, REI after a delay opened, but they've got a lot of space set aside for retail there. And I'm going to be very interested to see what goes in there because they don't want just anybody. They think this is a destination and they're going to want that kind of retailer there. They have plans for apartments to start construction there. You have the rebuilding of the Babcock, and they have another office building that they've announced, and a brewery to come too. So I think we'll be watching that a lot in 2021. Another space I'll keep my eye on is out in the Northeast at Village at Sandhill. You have a lot of open retail there. It's just a big complex. People may not realize unless they've been there that it has multiple anchors and a ton of space, but a lot of that space is now more attractively priced to lease, is out of bankruptcy where it was a couple of years ago. So it'll be interesting to see how much business will go in there in this year. And one other interesting thing that Jessica mentioned earlier downtown is that the push to expand the Columbia Metropolitan Convention Center was well underway before the pandemic, was kind of stopped cold as travel stopped and use of the convention center dropped. But now we're going to be, I think, seeing a renewed push on that to use some government money to expand the convention center into its current parking lot as the building was really designed for. And then if that happens, you see a bunch of hotels and multi-use and perhaps also apartments just right next to it. So that question was in the air in 2019 and early in 2020. It got shelved by coronavirus. But now my understanding is we're going to be talking about that again soon. I'll be writing about that because that's going to be a big project for Columbia to take on in the coming years.
That sounds good. And Jessica, is there anything you would want to add to that?
I guess I think some other areas, State Street over in West Columbia has had some recent openings actually here just this week. That there's a new brewery that just opened over there. Several new restaurants have opened. So there are business owners making a go of it and pushing forward with plans.
Right. Well, hey, we have a couple of questions so far, and we obviously will take more if you've got them out there. So Richard Brown asks, why has Greenville's downtown boomed, but Columbia has not? Is it a lack of government commitment, private wealth, and a stronger private commitment to common good, ? Or the political climate, or I guess all of the above? So how do you want to, so who wants to tackle that one? Why is Greenville maybe boomed in a way that Columbia hasn't in its downtown?
I'll take the first swing at that. I mean, it is a good comparison. Greenville's had a lot of economic activity, a lot of private economic activity, and they invested a lot in their downtown. They got their minor league team downtown, and because it's been a little economically stronger, its downtown took off. I think that Columbia's made, again, from my years here, has made a chunk of progress. They've block by block, Columbia has built it out and done pretty well. So I think that the teamwork is here in Columbia now. And I think that people's habits are changing. We'll see after the pandemic, things like Soda City Market have just made a difference in how people perceive downtown. So I think that we're on the way. It's never going to be as fast as Greenville because Greenville's, the big economy of the upstate just ties right into that so well with its manufacturing and things like BMW. So they've always had an energy advantage from private industry in Greenville. But I think Columbia, I mean, we're coming. We're not where they are, but we're coming along.
Reba Campbell asks, what trends are you seeing in the relationship between regional economic development and K through 12 education in the area? And if you Jessica, why don't you handle that one and also talk a little bit about, I guess, maybe some of the relationships between economic development and the colleges as well.
Sure. I guess as far as economic development and the education system goes, I think there is a developing partnership between Richland County trying to reach out to the school systems a little bit more. I think they have come to the realization that the talent base coming out of the schools, USC, and also building up their talent base from the grade level. Before the pandemic, we were experiencing record low unemployment, and there were not enough people to fill the jobs that existed in the state. And so I think there's a renewed interest in doing more to partner with the schools and build up that talent pool. One initiative that got squashed a little bit by the pandemic, but will hopefully come back afterwards, comes from the Manufacturers Association. They were going into high school and middle schools and surveying and taking interest from students who might be considering careers in the trades or who might want to work in the high-tech manufacturing field, and trying to set them up with internships, connecting them directly with companies. And it was an initiative I know they were really looking forward to. Another thing that the chamber and manufacturers have jumped on, they created a traveling truck or trailer that has simulators inside where people can go in and see what it's like to be a welder or see what it's like to drive a backhoe and maybe consider a career along those lines. And I guess with USC, with the new president coming in, he has launched into this initiative to partner with nearby Fort Gordon. He'd really like to see more cyber careers, and is trying to set up the school in that sense to be a feeder for some of these companies that might be moving to the area in service of Fort Gordon. And I know the county is eager to see some of that talent pool be developed as well.
Gotcha. Okay, Marcia Pierce wants to know, will working from home impact the commercial real estate market in Columbia beyond once we're past COVID?
I think that's going to be one of the more interesting questions of 2021. And my suspicion is that we will see companies reevaluating their use of space. I think we're already seeing some do that. So how much will that affect the office market if companies decide they just simply don't need as much space as they used to? I mean, little bits of that I've heard are anecdotal, and companies are still kind of scratching their heads, but that's definitely something I think that's going to be a key part of the office real estate market is companies looking around at their square footage and what they pay for their square footage and saying, can we do this with less? Because they may have been reluctant before to let people work from home, but they had no choice during the pandemic. So I think that's going to be a very big question and likely a trend in 2021 is companies saying, oh, go ahead and keep doing what you're doing. And we'll, instead of having 50,000 square feet, we'll have 20,000 square feet just for managers or something like that. So I think that's going to be a likely trend, but we'll have to see.
James,
I'm sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead, Jessica. I'm sorry.
I had an interesting conversation. We talked about the prevalence of the insurance tech sphere in Columbia, and I had an interesting conversation with someone who works in that sphere, Sam Magukin. He's recently relaunched into the market, trying to do a new startup. And one thing that he mentioned to me is they want an office presence, but he said it's likely to look very different from the office space that they set up when they moved into the Bull Street district. They see it more as a hub that people can drop into, maybe someplace when people are first starting with the company, they can come in to learn about the culture, but maybe not as much of a need for a large space with meeting rooms here and all, maybe a little bit smaller, kind of a mini water cooler to come in and develop ideas together, but not anything on that maybe they worked in before.
Thank you. And finally, I think for our last question for the day, unless somebody else and some folks have some other questions they want to throw at us, James wants to know what new hotels and apartments are coming to the Columbia region.
Well, I could mention a couple, and I'm sure there are others that Jessica will mention. You see, you've got Cambria hotels coming. You've got a couple and a boutique hotel coming to Assembly Street that I can think of off the top of my head. And as far as apartments coming, you've got, the student housing trend does not seem to want to stop. You had a second set of approval for the now 17-story student tower planned to go adjacent to Richland Library at Assembly in Washington. That's a massive structure, including parking, that's going to go right next to the library. So people keep asking, I think one of the questions that came out was are we done with student housing? Is that going to continue? I think that the lease rates, especially for desirable locations, are very strong. So that probably means more to come in the student housing area. Another separate side question will be whether the market is strong enough for apartments. You have a redevelopment and a new apartment project slated for Bull Street. So we'll see if that happens elsewhere after the pandemic.
I think as far as apartments go as well, we're seeing the continued trend of these apartments that are going into redeveloped historic buildings. We've got a boutique hotel that is moving into an older building in the Vista. We have another one a little further up Main that folks are working on. There's another one that's been proposed for the former Veterans Building near Finley Park. So we're continuing to see that. I guess along the same lines, there was another one that was looking to move into Rosewood Drive. So I don't think the apartment trend is slowing down or ending. And some of those are the ones that folks say they plan to move forward with this year.
Gotcha. And Julie, I guess, and I hope if I'm mispronouncing your name wrong, I apologize. And Julie Laborde asks, were there any indicators in the recent Ingenuity Report study that surprised you? Mike just did a story on this this week. So was there anything that surprised you there, Mike?
There was a couple of things, and you could have written a whole story about any one of them. One is that one of the numbers that holds back our livability ranking, how quality of life in Columbia, surprisingly, is you have is the violent crime ranking. Among the 10 cities listed, Columbia was listed 10th. Now it's not something you think of automatically as a business economic development issue, but when people think about where they want to move, where they want to put their business, that will raise some eyebrows. So that one was one that kind of surprised me a little bit. And another point that was made in discussion on this is that you have a fair amount of talent that comes to Columbia, gets educated in Columbia. Even you have a fair amount of international talent thanks to the university that comes to Columbia. So part of the challenge there is maybe more often in a work from home world, those people can decide to stay in Columbia rather than have to relocate to Atlanta, Charlotte, Washington to find their postgraduate job.
And in fact, they might find the livability here and the cost of living here better than they do if they're able to telecommute. That's an interesting observation. Was there any, I think Jessica, you took a look at that report too. Was there anything in there that caught your eye?
No, I think Mike pretty much covered it.
All right. Real quick, Robert Kim asks, is the Richland Renaissance dead now? I don't think we've reported on that directly. I think one of our colleagues has done that, but my understanding is that while the county has ownership of the anchor stores at Columbia Mall, for the most part, they're trying to figure out what to do with the rest of the plan, including trying to build a new courthouse. So the Renaissance plan, as it was, is not in existence, but some of the concepts are still being kicked around, and of course, the county's got to come up with uses for the property that are bought at the mall. So. Hopefully that'll answer that question. We went a little bit over on our time. I just thought, that we had a chance to be able to sort of share what we do and how we do here. We have included in the chat how to reach us, how to subscribe to the newspaper. That's how we pay for the coverage that we give you here in Columbia from the Post and Courier. We're the largest news organization in the state of South Carolina. We have newsrooms in Greenville, Myrtle Beach, Columbia. We own the paper in Aiken. Of course, we have the paper in Charleston. We can't forget them. They're the home base. That's where the boss is. But at the same time, the way we pay the bills is subscriptions. And that's just the way the model is changed in our business. So please consider subscribing. It's for basically a cup of coffee a week is what you get access to everything. You don't just get access to what's here in Columbia, but to all those other newsrooms I mentioned across the state. So to pay attention with a group of very talented journalists that we have. Also, if you just want to sample, I call it our menu. Subscribe to our newsletter, see what we put out. We have a daily news newsletter. Twice a week, we put out business news, mostly from these two reporters here. You'll get to see what we do. We also have a food newsletter. I always get hungry reading it. And a weekend newsletter as well with activities and what to do here in Columbia, even during the pandemic. There's still plenty to do here in town, even if it is virtual. I want to thank everybody who is watching today. As I said, look for the next one next month. Don't know what it's going to be on. Also, be happy to take suggestions on what you would like to hear and who you would like to hear from on this as well. We're open to that. Also, give these guys your story ideas, tips, all of that. We want to know things. That's how we find out. We want to build relationships with you. So please do that. Again, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for, if you're already a subscriber to the Post and Courier, thank you. If you're going to be one, we'll thank you when we get there. And please, everybody, have a great Thursday. Have a great day. Thank you.